I'm a taxi driver. I've had drunks, thieves, and even a hitman in my back seat. But nothing, absolutely nothing, was as terrifying as the night I realized I was driving a scientist who had just escaped a secret lab. And he wasn't carrying a briefcase full of money. He was carrying a deadly unknown virus. I'm telling you this now because I might be patient zero. It was 3 a.m. The city was dead quiet. I was parked near the old university campus, the one with the high-security research buildings. I got a ping for a pickup at a service entrance I didn't even know existed. When I pulled up, a man stumbled out. He was wearing a lab coat, but it was torn and stained. He looked pale, sweaty, and terrified. He was clutching a small metal canister like it was the last thing on Earth. He didn't give me an address. He just got in, slammed the door, and whispered, "Drive. South. Don't stop for anything. I'll pay you whatever you want." I looked at him in the rearview mirror. He wasn't a criminal. He was a scientist. His eyes were wide with a kind of desperate, frantic intelligence. But he was clearly injured. There was a deep, nasty cut on his arm, and he was trying to press a piece of lab coat against it. "Look, pal," I said, trying to stay calm. "You need a hospital. You're bleeding." "No hospitals," he hissed, his voice cracking. "If you take me to a hospital, we both die. Just drive. I need to get this sample to a safe place." He held up the metal canister. It was about the size of a coffee mug, sealed tight, and it had a small blinking red light on the side. It looked official. It looked dangerous. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, then leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial level. "It's a virus, a new strain. I was working on it. They tried to weaponize it. I had to get it out." I froze. A virus. In my cab with a bleeding man. I started driving, my mind racing. Was he crazy? Was this a prank? But the fear in his eyes was too real. The torn lab coat was too real. "Who were they?" I asked. "The company," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "They call it Project Chimera. It's designed to target specific DNA sequences. They lost control. It's airborne. I had to destroy the main culture, but I saved this sample. It's the only way to create an antidote." And then he looked at me, his eyes full of pity. "You're exposed, just by being in here. That cut on my arm, I don't know if I'm a carrier yet, but you need to know the symptoms." He started listing them. Fever, extreme fatigue, a strange dark rash. Every word he spoke made me feel a little more tired, a little more feverish. The power of suggestion was a terrifying thing. We drove for an hour, the scientist giving me complex, winding directions through back roads and industrial parks. He was clearly trying to evade someone. Then I saw it. A black SUV, unmarked, with tinted windows, was tailing us. They weren't using lights or sirens, but they were moving with a predatory speed that was unmistakable. "They're here," the scientist whispered, his voice shaking. "They know I took the sample. They'll kill us both to get it back." The black SUV pulled up fast, trying to box me in. I swerved, narrowly avoiding a collision. "You have to lose them," the scientist yelled. "If they get this, it's over." I slammed the gas pedal down, weaving the taxi through traffic, ignoring red lights. I was no longer a cab driver. I was a fugitive's accomplice driving a biological weapon. I took a sharp turn into a crowded all-night market. The scientist saw his chance. "Stop! Here!" he commanded. I slammed on the brakes. He fumbled with the door, his hands slick with sweat. "Listen to me," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "If I don't make it, you have to take this." He pressed the metal canister into my hand. It was cold, heavy, and the red light was blinking faster now. "The antidote is in the sample," he gasped. "It's the only way. You have to get it to the old observatory on the hill. Ask for Dr. Elena Rossi. Tell her Chimera is loose." He threw a handful of crumpled bills onto the seat. "This is for your trouble. Now go. Get out of here." He didn't wait for me to answer. He bolted out of the cab and disappeared into the crowd of the market, the black SUV screeching to a halt just seconds later. I sat there, the deadly canister in my hand, the news chatter on the radio suddenly sounding more urgent, more real. I looked down my arm. Was that a rash? Was I feeling a fever? I drove away, the canister secured in my glove compartment. I never went to the observatory. I was too scared, too exposed. I drove home, locked myself in my apartment, and started watching the news. A few days later, there was a small, quiet report about a containment breach at a local research facility. Nothing about a virus, nothing about a scientist, just a cleanup. I still have the canister. It's in a freezer in my basement. I check it every day. I check my temperature every hour. I look for the rash. I don't know if the scientist was a hero or a madman. I don't know if the virus is real or if the fear is the real infection. But every time I cough, every time I feel a little tired, I remember that night. I remember the cold metal in my hand. And I wonder if I'm just a cab driver or if I'm the last hope for a city that doesn't even know it's sick. If you want to hear more stories from the dark side of the city, hit that subscribe button. You never know who I'll pick up next.